FromSoft was always known for great and memorable early game encounters. Whether it was the Asylum Demon ambushing you in the Undead Asylum, Father Gascoigne awaiting you at the graveyard, or Judex Gundyr at the end of the Dark Souls 3 tutorial area, the first few bosses are always very important to set the tone and be memorable. And no game in the From Software Souls lineup has succeeded at it as well as Elden Ring did. Welcome to my video where I talk about why Elden Ring has my two favorite early game encounters in the Souls series, namely Margit the Fell Omen and Godrick the Grafted. If you enjoy this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe, it helps out the channel massively. Also be sure to hit the bell for notifications to not miss any future videos. Godrick and Margit are very memorable bosses, but for different reasons. Margit is probably the biggest early game bully in the series, and Godrick just delivered one of the most memorable performances and is definitely a fan favorite in this regard. And this is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. With everything out of the way, let's get into it. Margit does a superb job as an early game encounter in Elden Ring. If the Tree Sentinel didn't teach you this lesson, Margit for sure will. If you feel too weak for a fight, there is no reason to punch against this wall, you can go explore the open world. However, it's still awesome that you can defeat these bosses. There is nothing preventing you from fighting the boss even with very weak gear and being underleveled, which I really like about From Software games. But not only this very crucial lesson is taught in this encounter, the encounter also prepares you for everything that is coming for you in Elden Ring. Insanely delayed attacks you can jump over, like the scorpion tail here, positioning based rolls, basically you need to roll in a certain direction to avoid the rest of the combo, and of course positioning in fights, because depending where you stand he can do different follow-ups. He has insanely cruel punishes and seems like an unfair boss at times, because whatever you do he will always do the dagger double swipe, but when you really learn him and know when he can do them, it feels so incredibly rewarding that you finally mastered this incredible boss. This boss is just fantastic. Everything he will teach you will come in practice later. The insane delays in, for example, Radahn's fight, the jumping over attack in for example, Godfrey's fight, and of course positioning based being part of the entire game, like here in the Millennia fight. It's just something that's incredibly crucial for the entire game. But not only is Margit a great early game boss to teach you the mechanics, he also builds up anticipation, because after you defeat him he has this message. And when I heard these voice lines the first time while watching some Elden Ring network test videos, I was so hyped for the re-fight we would get. Back then I didn't know we would later get one of the best bosses ever made, but that's a story for a different video. I think both Margit and Godrick are very important for the early game in Elden Ring, but for very different reasons. Godrick is the first demigod boss you face in Elden Ring, and he's far from bad. Actually, he's very good mechanically. He has some very cool and fun mechanics, positioning based combos, and some insane delays. Like, I still haven't adjusted to them because I mostly tend to space them. It's definitely a great fight. However, I think the more interesting thing about Godrick is that it shows you how a demigod fight is structured. Demigod fights have just great lore. They all have their unique personalities, and Godrick is of course no exception to this. His presentation is just fantastic. He has two incredibly well-made cutscenes, and the voice actor really just went all out.
I command thee now. Forefathers one and all.
So the presentation is top-notch. The soundtrack is also one of my favorites in the series and by extension in Elden Ring too. It's absolutely amazing. Both phases are insane. The scary, intense nature of the first phase and the bombastic climax of phase 2. It's fantastic. Another very interesting thing is that Godrick is just the first demigod. He's by far the most pathetic slug of a demigod you will encounter in the game. He already has a lot of crazy things going on, like chopping off a dragon's head to use it as a flamethrower, or his grafting, and this is the first demigod you face, so it builds anticipation. What will you fight later in the game? What kind of crazy stuff will you face later? Well, later you will encounter stuff like Rykard, so yeah, Godrick really only was the tip of the iceberg. Another aspect about Godrick I really value is the build-up throughout Limgrave. It really feels like an organic representation of someone who has control over a certain region. There are his soldiers and his subordinates everywhere. There are people who are scared and terrified of his graphics crafting practices, and then there are people who insult him and belittle him because they don't think he's even worthy of being a lord. It's genuinely just a very, very well placed boss, and I loved him ever since they showed him back then in the 20-minute gameplay. It was so incredibly hype. In conclusion, I can say that both Godrick and Margit fulfill very different but also very important roles in the early game of Elden Ring. While Godrick is the first proper introduction to what a demigod fight will be like, offering fantastic spectacle, great presentation, very fun lore and awesome mechanics, Margit is just the perfect early game challenge to teach you everything you will need for this game. I had a friend who played a Souls game, it being Elden Ring, for the first time, and he was stuck on Margit for very long. However, after defeating Margit, nothing really even came close to the difficulty spike. He is just that good at teaching you the game, unlike some yappers on YouTube like to claim.
In Sekiro, you can respond to everything while doing that damage. In Elden Ring, my patience is being tested to wait, and wait, and wait, and then hopefully the Witcher 3 video comes out and there isn't some secret extension to this combo I'm punishing that I don't know about. Hopefully the boss doesn't dice roll on resisting a stagger or randomly decide to dodge away from this hit, denying the opportunity I had to wait so long for. I know there is a way to do these fights hitless if you're patient enough, or build yourself to burst them down quickly, but
I don't know. It's okay to dislike Elden Ring bosses at times. I think they can be pretty challenging and tough, and maybe it's not for everyone, and that's fine, but claiming stuff that is not true and lying is just so sad.
If the boss didn't also have a nigh unreactable flaming claw response that can punish slow weapon strikes, then I'd be on board with considering this a cool gimmick for the fight.
However, that's besides the point. I don't think these two bosses are the only thing that makes the early game experience of Elden Ring so great. There is the fantastic cinematic cutscene, there is the amazing area Limgrave to explore with a lot of fun side content, and of course I need to mention one of the best levels they ever designed, Stormvale Castle, where you can even take two completely separate paths. You can take the quick path through the gate, it being more dangerous, or the sneaky path through the back of the castle. It's just an insanely well designed area, and it made the build up towards Godrick even more fun. The atmosphere is also on point. Overall, the early game in Elden Ring is just perfect, and a lot of stars needed to align for it to be this good, and I think Godrick and Margit are one of the biggest reasons why it's so beloved. They are just fantastic bosses. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like, maybe share it if you like this content. There's a lot more coming in the future. Once again, thank you so much for supporting. Please comment down below what you think about these bosses, and if you agree with me or disagree, I'm always open for fun discussions. With everything said, have a nice day and bye!